のように侍は
Perhaps Kurosawa's personal feelings are best expressed when the character of the fool states that, in a mad world, only the mad are sane. So, I recently rewatched the new 4K DVD of Ron, and I've probably seen this movie at this point like 8 times, probably more. It's easily one of my most favorite films of all time. And I know some people find it slow. I've seen a lot of comments saying that, but I don't really think so at all. In fact, for some reason I could just keep on watching this movie. I try to watch it at least once a year. And as I've stated in a previous video, I think this is the most beautiful film of all time. And if any movie deserved a 4K remaster, it's definitely this one. But when I decided to watch it this time, it had me wondering just what this film is all about. What's its overall message? It seems very bleak and hopeless, and usually that's not something I advocate for. I want actual meaning in my stories, and just a reason to keep on fighting. Some kind of hope. And this film doesn't really have that when you think about it. But I think this film's mysterious message is more so about its legendary director, Akira Kurosawa. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to spoil this movie in this video. If you haven't seen it by now, I don't know why you haven't. Shame on you. But, that's okay. You could go stream it. They have it on Amazon. Or even better yet, just pick up the new 4K DVD. And prepare for something that you've never seen before. I do really think that this film is special. It's like something I've seen in my actual dreams. Like seriously, it's kind of freaky like that. Sometimes I'll just see something randomly and be reminded of this film. It's magical to me. But in order to really cover its message, I really want to get deep with this video. And unfortunately, I might not be able to use that much footage for this video. I've been warned that the studio that produced this film is a real pain in the ass about copyright. So a majority of the video might just be a lot of still images. But in a way, this film is like a picture in itself, so even still images look great. Anyway, I just want to be safe with that, and let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. So starting off with the title, even though it's only one word, the title Ron has multiple meanings. This is mainly due to its rough English translation. Ron, which is Japanese for chaos, perfectly embodies just the political and social atmosphere of the film's setting. And it's a setting that's just plagued by constant war and instability. The basic plot is as follows. An aging Sengoku-era warlord, Hidetori Ichimonji. He decides to step down as a ruler and give power to his 3 sons. His kingdom slowly disintegrates as each son craves power, murdering each other and rivals and just laying waste to the land. In the most famous scene of the film, Hidetori goes insane after watching his retainers get slaughtered in an epic massacre. And that's exactly what that scene was. It was a slaughter. It wasn't a battle, as they were insanely outnumbered. As the kingdom burns and rival warlords just move in for the kill, the Ichimonji clan collapses in a frenzy of revenge and betrayal as old scores are finally settled. I think it's definitely the most memorable scene in the film, and it's usually the first thing that you think about when you picture this movie. The story is based on the legends of the daimyo Mori Munenori, as well as on the Shakespearian tragedy King Lear. On my most recent rewatching of the film, I realized that the action doesn't really center on the old man played by Tatsuya Nakadai. Instead, the film has a very fearful energy of its own. Kurosawa did not tell the story of a great man whose sin of pride drives him mad. But instead, it's the story of a man whose created all this war all of his life, and now he just wants to step down and he hopes to create peace in his old age. But instead, him trying to make peace is ultimately what unleashes even greater chaos. And there's a lot of similarities in this film, not only with kings, but you could also say with filmmakers. And like with royalty, they must enforce their vision in a world that's filled with, envy, vanity, and even greed. Much of Ron's aesthetic is placed on the battle sequences, particularly on the new piece of weapon known as the firearm. The musket itself is greater than the outdated swords, bows, and arrows. It lays waste to anyone and anything that stands before it. This is a quote from Akira Kurosawa. All the technological progress of these last years has only taught human beings how to kill more of each other faster. It's very difficult for me to retain an optimistic outlook on life under such circumstances. When you look at the time period of when Ron first released, it was during the final years of the Cold War. But Ron could also be read as a metaphor for nuclear warfare. And as you would know from the director's other films like I Live in Fear and Rhapsody in August, Kurosawa saw the devastating effects of the atomic bombings firsthand in his home country. Other meanings of the film's title could also be interpreted as confused or disturbed. And this could be attributed to the main character of Hidatora. In the film, the warlord's servant Tango acts as a pessimistic voice of reason. He states that men prefer sorrow over joy, suffering over peace. And in such a world, confusion is really a natural state.
Are there no gods anymore? Is there no Buddha?
And with the character of the Fool, at the film's bitter ending, he questions the gods. He demands to know why they torment people so often. And to this, Tango rebukes him, saying that the gods don't torment them, but instead are sympathetic.
The gods are weeping just as we are. They've seen us men on Earth killing each other, killing again and again since the very beginning of time. Only they can't seem to save us from ourselves.
Here's another quote from Kurosawa in regards to Ron. What I was trying to get at in Ron, and this was there from the script stage, was that the gods or God or whoever is observing human events is feeling sadness about how human beings destroy each other, and powerlessness to affect human beings' behavior.
In a mad world, only the mad are sane!
Ron is considered to be Kurosawa's last great epic. I wouldn't say it's his last great film because I do really like Dreams. After the Rain is also a great film, but he technically only wrote the screenplay, he didn't direct it. But that one does feel a lot like a Kurosawa directed film. Ron had a budget of $12 million. It was the most expensive Japanese film ever produced at the time. Kurosawa would direct 3 other films before he died, but none would be even close to the scale of Ron. The film was just praised for its powerful images and use of color. The costume designer Emi Wada even won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design for her work with Ron. There's also the distinctive Gustav Mahler-inspired film score. It was written by Toru Takemitsu. And he actually does the score for a lot of Kurosawa films and samurai films. And I will say the score in this does add a lot to the film. The massacre scene is just genius the way it's done. It plays in isolation with all the ambient sound muted. It's haunting. Today, Akira Kurosawa is mentioned among the greatest directors of all time. But what's weird is for just the amount of time that he was without funds, even in his own country. He was the master of his destiny for only 15 years of his long life and career. From 1950 with Shaman until 1965 with Redbeard. And in that span, he made many masterpieces like Seven Samurai, Drone of Blood, Ikaru, The Hidden Fortress, High and Low, Yojimbo, Sanjuro. There's just a ton. But then times got rough. In Japan, he was condemned as being too Western and too old-fashioned. He was forced to beg for his budgets. His biggest flop was Doda's Kaden. It released in 1970. And that's a film that depicted the life of the poor in Tokyo. I wouldn't call it the worst film ever made. It's not even Kurosawa's worst film. But it is just depressing and just filled with ugly film sets and scenery. It all takes place in a garbage dump. It's not exactly what you go to a Kurosawa film to see. And worst of all, it was just heavily rejected by the Japanese audience. Another 5 years passed before he found the Russian financing for Dersu Uzala. It's the story of the Mongolian woodsman who guides a Russian explorer. It's an excellent film, one of my favorites, and it won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film. But still, somehow it didn't do well at the box office. In 1975, he announced that he wanted to make a samurai epic based on Shakespeare's King Lear. But he ultimately just couldn't find any financing for it. So in 1980, he made the medieval epic Kagemusha, and he called it a dress rehearsal for the film that would go on to become Ran. But even though Kagemusha was a success, there was still no money for Ran. In addition to being a great director, Kurosawa was also a great artist, and he had many paintings of just locations and characters and costumes and stories. And these paintings would go on to be scenes that were in his films. And you could just look some of these up on YouTube, they're pretty incredible. It's just amazing how he was able to just bring these images and bring them to life in film. And they're just so close to the actual paintings, you could just tell. The man was just a true artist, and his work transferred very well to film. And because of this, you could tell that the films he made were his original visions. Many times, the original vision just doesn't come out the way the artist plans, but not in his case. But after years of just bad luck, he finally got the big break that he needed. And this was all with the French producer of Serge Silberman, who also helped other outsiders. And now Kurosawa finally found the funds for Ran. So I brought all this up just because I feel that the real message of Ran can be learned if you know about the creator himself. I feel like you could see a lot of Kurosawa in Ran. At this point in his life, he was already 75 years old, but he still had these unfulfilled dreams. And to accomplish this dream, he had to fight against his own mortality and age. His eyesight at this point was becoming a major problem, and by his mid-80s, he was practically blind. But this is where his paintings came in handy. He drew and painted just thousands of images to show to his team. And this was basically just what he wanted Ran to look like. But that wasn't his only problem. Before all this, he had attempted suicide. And he even announced that Ran would be his last film. But eventually he returned for Dreams in 1990. And that film is pretty interesting because it's actually based on his actual dreams. There's like different stories in it. And after that, he went on to make Rhapsody in August. And his true last film would be Montevideo in 1993. And that final film of his would be about an older professor who's just honored by his students on his birthday. It's a very simple story, but I think it's a metaphor for Kurosawa himself. The title translates as "Not Yet," and it refers to the old man's defiance that he is still not dead. But getting back to Ron, the story is very similar to Shakespeare's King Lear. This includes the whole, old king who unwisely divides his kingdom into 3 parts. In Ron, it's amongst his sons, whereas in King Lear, it involves his daughters. There's also the fool to keep the old man company, and a loyal guard to shadow and protect him. He gets exiled after his sons claim that their father's troops overtaxed their hospitality. We see him jump from a cliff, and he descends into madness. He also has a flash of insight, and he's able to apologize to the person that he has wronged. When I first saw this film, I basically just thought it was a cool depiction of medieval war and battles and betrayal. But that's just the backdrop. It's a story that's really about an older man's pride and decay. In King Lear, he was driven mad because he does not love the daughter who loves him. And he ultimately sees his wrong when his other daughters betray him. Where in Ron, he is driven mad because of the wars between his sons. The change is from the spiritual to the physical. King Lear is more personal and Ron is more catastrophic. King Lear centers around the character of the old man. Where in Ron, you could say the old man really isn't the central theme. In fact, we get the impression that life is quickly moving past him. He wanders from one tragedy to another, until eventually just being pushed into madness. We also learn that he spent most of his life just waging many battles and wars, until finally he just had control of everything that he saw. Now he wants to divide it between his 3 castles among his 3 sons. And he thinks by doing this it's gonna bring peace. His youngest son loves him the most, and he tells him that this will never work.
There is no unity among us. Soon we shall be at each other's throats.
And this is actually the son that he banishes. And after that, the son will go on to marry the family of another powerful warlord. Just as in King Lear, where Cordelia marries the King of France. Eventually, wars just consume the lands as the 2 sons battle for control. The old man now wanders through the wasteland, accompanied only by his fool. And his sons are just more concerned with their battles, more so than now their pathetic father.
You should be the one to wear this helmet.
So now it's time to discuss Lady Kaede. First of all, the actress who plays her just does a perfect job. I think it's a great portrayal of just this horrible woman. And if you think about it, she could be the real villain of this film.
But always remember, I could easily destroy you!
So she's the wife of the oldest son, and her real mission is just to get revenge on his father.
I don't care at all about my husband's death. The only thing that concerns me is what happens to me!
And she'll get her revenge even if it means destroying everything, and even if it means her dying.
And all that I set out to accomplish, I have done.
What's interesting is she has, the eyebrows that are high up on the forehead, but it gives sort of the illusion of constant disapproval. I think she could also be inspired by Lady Macbeth. She plays a very similar, evil, manipulative woman. And in the story after Taro is killed, she threatens the life of his brother Jiro. She actually sucks the blood from a cut she made on his neck. It makes you wonder, why Taro was even married to her. Like, was he into some weird stuff? In a way, she is a creation of Hidetora's past actions, his past sins, and it's too late to fix them. Him trying to just create peace and fix all of his wrongs is exactly what causes more bloodshed. Vengeance and beheadings go on non-stop after this, and it's all because of his foolish dreams of peace. And Lady Kaede's death scene is just one of the most iconic. In fact, it's like in every trailer for some reason, but it's like a big spoiler. And the way it's done is it's below the frame, but it produces just this iconic splash of this bright red blood on the wall. And it's really just a masterstroke of timing and execution. I can't say this enough, but this film really is just visually incredible in every single way. It was one of Kurosawa's first color films. He did seem to really enjoy black and white, but with Ran and Kagemusha, he really showed us what he could do with color. What's interesting is every sun in this wears a different color, and you could probably come up with a lot of symbolism for what each of these colors represents. The scene of the burning castle would definitely not be as effective if it was in black and white. It definitely needs those true colors of fire. It's also worth noting just how Emi Iwata's costumes won the Academy Award for Best Costume Design.
If clothes make the man, then certainly the costume makes the actor.
And the costumes itself is what really gives the film most of its color. It's amazing what just clothing could do in a film, or in this case, what it could do to a portrait, because Ran really is just a portrait. Also, the 1400 costumes were handmade in Kyoto, and they were done in the traditional Japanese way. It took 3 to 4 months to make each beautifully colored robe. The work was also done simultaneously, and it was nearly 3 years before it was all finished. And in the film, Kurosawa will usually use these, bland backgrounds. But it's all implemented just to make all these colors pop. With this film, you could tell that Kurosawa refined everything that he learned from his previous film, Kagemusha, as well as his earlier samurai epics. He uses several static cameras just to film all the action, cutting between each of them. And what's interesting is the way Ran is filmed is we aren't really supposed to feel like we're there in person participating. Instead, I think our role as the audience is just to observe from a distance and to take it all in and just go home and think about it. So even though Ran opened to mostly positive reviews, it was still a modestly successful film. When it first premiered in Japan, it only made $12 million. It was just enough to break even. And its US release, which was 6 months later, earned it another $2 to $3 million. And the re-release in 2000 earned it another $300,000.
And the winner is Emi Iwata for Ran.
Ran had some similar bad luck when it came to the awards. Kurosawa skipped the premiere, and this angered a lot of Japanese in the film industry. This was actually Japan's first film festival, and as a result of this, Ran was not submitted as Japan's entry for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. Serge Silberman tried to get it nominated as a French co-production, but that also failed. It was also unsuccessfully nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Foreign Film. Ran was also nominated for Art Direction, Cinematography, and Costume Design, which it did win that one.
I thank you, especially the Mr. Kurosawa and crew worked together. そして私の夫にも感謝したいと思います。
Also to my wife, to my husband.
ありがとうございました。
I thank you very, very much.
Ron was suspiciously not nominated for Best Picture at the awards at the Japanese Academy. However, it did win 2 prizes for Best Art Direction and Best Music Score, and it received 4 other nominations for Best Cinematography, Best Lighting, Best Sound, and Best Supporting Actor. Ron also won 2 awards for the British Academy of Film and Television Arts for Best Foreign Language Film and Best Makeup Artist. It was also nominated for Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, and Best Screenplay Adapted. Today, the film is regarded as one of Kurosawa's greatest masterpieces, along with Seven Samurai and Akira. So to sum this all up, I think that Ron could be about a bunch of things. But it no doubt relates to Kurosawa, his interests, and just what he had going on at that point in his life. Every age just gets stories that correspond with what's going on in that time period. I feel like no one just writes a story just to tell it. There's always some underlying message that the writer wants to share. And oftentimes, you can learn a lot about a creator just by their art. King Lear was actually written during a time when kings still ruled by divine right. It was a Renaissance belief that human destiny was influenced by one's inner humors. Lear's pride brought about his fall, whereas in Ron, it's set in medieval times, but it was made in the 80s. It's a telling of an old man, at the end of his life, having won all of his battles, and foolishly thinking that he still has the power to settle things for a new generation. But life often speeds on ahead without any respect for what came before it. His children have their own sins, and he is no longer relevant, and they're just gonna divide his spoils. Did this express Kurosawa's own view at the age of 75? As he looked back on one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of movies, did he reflect upon this while the West was happy to buy, gut, and remake his work? He had lost all of his power and respect in especially the country whose films he once ruled. It all sounds tragic, but Ron is a tragic story, and I guess us who do enjoy this film can kind of relate to all the tragicness. Anyway, that was my big Ron video. I just want to say that I love this film. But you know, looking back at its bleak message and story, I often wonder why I like this movie so much. Maybe that just says something about me. But even so, just the visuals themselves, they're beautiful. But this could also be saying that the beauty of life can also distract us and make us forget about all the chaos around us. Anyway, I just want to thank everyone for watching this video. It was a lot of work, so hopefully you can support my channel. You could always check out my Patreon, subscribe, thumbs up, and like always, thanks for watching.